The banquet hall of Merovene had been built to silence ordinary voices. Seraphel understood this the moment she stepped through the servant's door. The ceiling rose so high the torchlight could not reach it, and the stone arches swallowed every sound that was not meant to be heard. Only those who stood on the dais could be heard by every soul in the room. Tonight, she had been chosen. She should have felt honored. The house mistress had told her so a dozen times while tying the pale blue ribbons at her wrists. A kitchen girl selected to sing at the Alpha King's Alliance banquet was a thing that happened once in a generation. A thing that could change a life. A thing that could end one, if the girl displeased the wrong ear. Seraphel had only nodded. She was not a kitchen girl at all. The great doors opened before her, and she walked into the heart of a world that had tried to forget her. Nobles in silver and crimson filled the long tables. Warriors of the Alpha King's guard lined the walls in dark leather, their wolves close beneath the surface of their skin. And at the far end of the hall, seated on a carved throne of pale northern oak, was the man she had loved in secret for almost a year. Kelric. She did not allow her eyes to linger. That was the first rule he had taught her in the gardens of the summer lodge, when he had pressed her against the vine-heavy wall and whispered her name like a man who had finally found water after walking through desert. Never look too long. Never reveal what you know. Their love had been built on silences, on stolen hours, on a mark he had placed against her collarbone one night by the hidden stream below the lodge, when the moon had hung full and golden over the water. The mark was small. The mark was shaped like the crescent of a waning moon, and the mark was hidden now beneath the high collar of her singer's dress. The crescent had been burning for 7 days. She had not understood why at first. The claiming mark of a true mate was meant to feel like warmth. It was not meant to burn. It was not meant to wake her with a pain so sharp she bit her own hand to keep from crying out. She had asked the old washwoman about it. The washwoman had only stared at her and said that a burning mark meant one of two things. Either the bond was being severed by force, or the one who carried it was about to lose something far greater than she yet understood. She walked between the tables with her hands folded and her eyes lowered. Servants moved between the rows with trays of roasted pheasant and golden plum wine. And in the shadows between two pillars, Seraphel saw him watching her. Not Kelric, the other one. Lord Varick stood with a goblet in his hand, his pale face turned toward her with the slow patience of a man who had been waiting a long time. His silver hair was pulled back from a forehead carved by decades of calculation. His eyes, the color of bog water at dusk, held her the way a hawk holds a mouse. She had never spoken to Lord Varick in her life. She should have been invisible to him. Their love had been hidden from every eye in Merovene. Not even his first sworn had been allowed to know, but Lord Varick was looking at her as if he knew. He raised his goblet to her, a slow, deliberate salute, and he smiled. Seraphel's stomach turned over. She pulled her gaze away and kept walking. The dais loomed closer. The herald at the foot of it was already lifting his staff. She was to sing after the royal proclamation, to offer the opening blessing of the Alliance banquet, to lift her voice in a hymn chosen for her by a council she had never seen. She did not yet know that the hymn had been chosen as a trap. She reached the base of the dais and knelt, the pale blue of her dress pooling around her on the cold stone. She did not look up. She knew every line of his face. The herald struck the stone with his staff. The hall fell silent. His Majesty, Alpha King Kelric of Merovene, Warden of the Northern Reach, he who runs with the Ash Pack, welcomes the houses of the river provinces to this banquet of alliance. The hall bowed as one. Seraphel did not lift her head, but she listened. She had grown up on the voice that was about to speak. She had heard it whisper her name in darkness, heard it rasp against her ear on the night he had told her she was his fated one, and that nothing in this world or any other would ever tear them apart. He had told her those words 4 days ago. She had come to the banquet expecting a sign, a private phrase hidden inside a public speech, a small signal that only she would understand. She had come with a second secret carried close against her body beneath the pale blue dress, a secret she had not yet told him. Instead, she heard his voice say, "Tonight, before you drink, before you eat, you will witness an oath. Rise, daughter of the Ilveran line, and come forward." Seraphel's breath left her body. She lifted her head before she could stop herself. A woman was rising from the first table, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the deep forest green of House Ilveran. Her hair was the red of autumn oak. She walked with the slow grace of someone who had been rehearsed for this moment across many years, and Kelric was watching her come. Not with love, not with hatred, not with anything at all. His face was a mask. Seraphel felt the mark at her collarbone flare, a sudden lash of heat so sharp she nearly gasped aloud. She pressed her hand to the high collar of her dress to hide it. Her eyes stayed fixed on his. She searched for any flicker of the man she knew. There was nothing. His eyes passed over her as if she were one of the painted tiles on the floor. The woman from House Ilveran reached the dais. She climbed the steps. She knelt. She lifted her hands, palms upward, in the ancient gesture of offered alliance. Kelric rose from his throne, and the crescent on Seraphel's collarbone began to bleed beneath her dress. She felt the first slow trickle run down her skin. A claiming mark did not bleed. Not ever. A claiming mark was a promise written into flesh, and a promise could not bleed unless it was being unwritten. Somewhere in this hall, someone was tearing her bond apart. She was the opening blessing of an alliance that was about to destroy her. And she realized, in a single blinding instant, that she had been invited to this banquet for one purpose only: to witness, to bless, and to disappear. Because no one would permit a secret mate to walk out of this hall alive. Kelric was speaking now, but Seraphel could not hear the words. The blood on her skin had reached the neckline of her dress. And in the shadows by the pillar, Lord Varick was still watching her, and his smile had grown wider. She understood then. She understood all of it. She rose to her feet before anyone could stop her. She did not sing the hymn. She did not offer the blessing. She did not look at Kelric one last time, because she knew that if she did, she would not be able to move again. She turned and walked down the length of the hall with her hands folded and the blood of her broken mark soaking slow and hot into the pale blue of her dress. The nobles stared. Someone called out behind her, but she did not stop. She walked through the great doors, past the startled guards, into the long corridor beyond. Then she ran. She ran through the servants' hall. She ran through the kitchen garden. She ran into the outer yard with one hand pressed hard against the bleeding crescent at her collarbone, and the other wrapped low across the slight curve of her belly that no one had yet noticed. Not even him, because she had not been given the chance to say it. She ran into the night, and she did not look back. If she had, she might have seen the figure on the high balcony above the garden wall. She might have seen the Alpha King standing motionless with one hand braced against the stone, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon where she had vanished, and his mouth open in the shape of a name he could not remember. She might have seen the single drop of blood that ran down his own collarbone, matching hers. But she did not look back. And the banquet hall behind her, ancient and cavernous and built to silence ordinary voices, filled with a low wrongness that no one in the room could yet name. The village of Calder Hollow did not ask questions about the women who arrived in its final hours of autumn. Seraphel understood this was why the old roadkeeper had pointed her toward it. 3 nights after she had fled Merovane with nothing but a cloak and the coin sewn into her hem. He had studied her face at the edge of his lantern light, noted the dark stain along her collar, and said only that there was a place 2 days south where a quiet woman could become a quieter one. She had walked. By the time she crossed the low stone bridge into Calder Hollow, the first snow had begun to fall. The village elder, a thin woman named Brenna who ran the herb garden behind the meeting house, had taken one look at her and installed her in an empty weaver's cottage at the edge of the orchard without any conversation at all. The loom in the main room was dusty and abandoned. Seraphil wiped it clean, and by the end of her first week had woven a length of gray wool fine enough to trade for a month of bread. She gave her name as Wren. It was a bird's name, a small name, a name that asked nothing of the ear. The winter passed this way. Snow, cold stars, the slow creep of the thaw, the first shoots of spring pushing up through the mud. Seraphil wove. She gathered herbs for Brenna. She taught the elder's grandchildren how to read the old symbols stitched into the margins of blankets. She kept her voice so far inside her chest that some weeks she did not speak a full sentence to anyone. She had stopped singing. Her voice had been the thing that found her. Her voice had drawn Kelric to her 2 winters ago, when she had hummed a shepherding tune over her apples in the cold cellar, and he had stopped in the doorway, as if she had struck him. Her voice had been the reason Lord Varick had selected her for the Alliance hymn. Her voice had been the trap. So she had put it away. She hummed only in the deepest part of the night, when no one could hear. The small one who had begun to move beneath her palms had become 2, Brenna told her in early spring. 2 heartbeats. The elder had not asked who the father was. The crescent at her collarbone had stopped bleeding after the 3rd day of her journey, but it had not healed. It had darkened into a shape that was no longer quite the shape Kelric had given her. A crescent with a second smaller curve running through it. She bound it with linen each morning and covered it with a high collar, and pretended the ache of it was the ache of an old scar. It still spoke to her. She felt it most at dusk. A slow pulse, steady and mournful, as if something far away was calling her name. She told herself 100 times that this was her own longing, not his. The threads between them had been unwritten. She had felt them tear. She told herself this. She did not believe it. She had begun to dream, in recent weeks, of a man standing in a field of white ash. He walked toward her with his hands held open. He was trying to speak. His mouth moved and no sound came out. She woke with tears on her face and the crescent at her collarbone burning so hot that she pressed snow-cooled linen against it. It was on a bright spring afternoon, with the orchard just beginning to bud, that the trader came up from the south. His name was Odren. He traveled the long road between the coastal markets and the mountain villages. On the 2nd evening of his visit, Brenna came to the weaver's cottage with a strange look on her face and asked Seraphil to sit. "The trader has brought news," Brenna said. Seraphil set down her spindle. "News of what?" "The Alpha King." Brenna's voice was careful, the way one speaks around a stove that may still be hot. "Kelric." Seraphil's hand closed on the arm of her chair. "What of him?" "He has unmade the alliance," Brenna said. "He has dissolved his oath with House Ilveran. He has burned the wedding hall of Maravan to the ground with his own 2 hands, and for 3 months now, he has been searching the northern reach for a woman whose name he will not say." The spindle slid out of Seraphil's lap and rolled across the floor. "Searching," she said at last. "Searching how?" "Odrin says the king rides out each week with his first sworn and a small band of wolves, and they return with nothing. The wolves of the north have grown strange. They gather at the edges of villages and will not cross into them. The crops in the northern reach are thin this year. The old women along the coast are saying that the land is sick because the king is sick. The king has offered no reward, he only rides. And when he is not riding, Odrin says, he does not speak, and he does not sleep." Seraphil could not feel her hands. Did the traitor say anything of Lord Varick? Brenna's face changed. He said, "Lord Varick has vanished." that no one has seen him since the night of the banquet, that the Alpha King has placed a price on his head so large it could buy a small province, and yet the Lord has not been found, because Lord Varric was not a lord at all. Brenna paused. Odrin says the man was something older, something that had worn a lord's face for many years. He says the king now hunts Varric harder than he hunts the woman, because he believes Varric is the one who did it. Did what? Brenna looked at her for a long moment. Child, the elder said gently, I have asked you nothing. I will ask you nothing now. But the traitor said one thing more. He said the king is searching for a voice. Every time the king comes to a village, he walks the main road and stops at every window where a woman is singing, and he listens for a long moment, and then he walks on. Odrin thought it was a sign that the king had lost his mind. Seraphel could not speak. She sat with her hands on her belly and the two small ones turning restlessly beneath her palms. I will not tell anyone, Brenna said at last. Not Odrin, not a single soul. But there are strangers in this village tonight who are not strangers. 3 men came in with the traitor. They rode apart from him for the last half of the road. They are drinking at the tavern now, and they are not drinking. They are listening. Seraphel rose. The room tilted. I must go. Go where? I do not know. Brenna caught her by the wrist. You will not walk out of this cottage tonight, not on foot. Not with 2 small ones inside you. I will go to Odrin. He has a wagon with a false floor. He owes me a debt. Tomorrow before dawn, you will be on the road. Why you are doing this, Seraphel whispered. Because the mark on your throat bleeds when you are afraid, the elder said quietly, and I saw it the first night you came. And because no woman carries that kind of mark for an ordinary man. And because whatever it is that is hunting you, child, I will not let it take you from my house. She turned and left the cottage. A voice, the traitor had said. The king walked through every village listening for a voice. Kelric. Searching, not with pack and spear and reward, but with his own ears, because he did not know what she looked like anymore. Something had been done to him on the night of the banquet that had taken everything from him except the memory of a sound. She understood why the mark had bled instead of faded. She understood why the dreams had come. Varric had not unmade the bond. The bond had never been unmade. The bond had only been hidden. Something Varric had slipped into the Alpha King's wine and into the hymn she had never been permitted to sing. The bond was still there. The bond was what Kelric was following, village after village, down into the south. The bond had brought him to Calder Hollow. The men at the tavern were not the king. The men at the tavern were Varric's. Seraphel opened her eyes. Outside, the sun had gone down behind the orchard. Through the open window she heard, very faint and very far away, the long single note of a wolf calling from the hills above the village. The crescent at her collarbone flared with heat. A second wolf answered the first, then a third. Then, closer, at the edge of the orchard itself, a branch cracked beneath a heavy foot. Seraphel moved to the window. She saw, through the blue evening and between the budding apple trees, 3 shapes walking toward the cottage. Not wolves. Men. Tall. Hooded. Moving without torches because they did not need torches. And behind them, somewhere further back in the dark orchard, something larger was coming. Something that did not move like a man and did not move like a wolf and did not move like anything Seraphel had a name for. The mark at her collarbone tore open and began to bleed again for the first time since she had fled. Seraphel did not scream. She had spent too many weeks teaching her voice to stay inside her chest, and even now the sound did not rise. She pulled the shutter closed with the careful fingers of a woman who had once served dinner to 100 guests without rattling a single plate. The weaver's cottage had a cellar, reached by a trapdoor that had been covered by the loom. The hooded men would find it within minutes, but the cellar had a second door, a low wooden hatch in the northern wall, sealed with a rusted latch she had oiled one rainy afternoon. The hatch opened into a drainage trench that ran beneath the garden wall and came out near the roots of the oldest apple tree. She crossed the main room with the practiced quiet she had spent a season rehearsing. She pushed the loom aside. She lifted the trapdoor. She slipped down into the cool dark. She could hear the hooded men at the front door. They did not knock. The first one tried the latch. The second spoke, low and flat, in a language Seraphel did not know but recognized, an old mountain tongue, the kind that had not been spoken at the royal court of Maierovani in 200 years. The third hooded man laughed. The sound did not belong to any man. She fumbled for the rusted latch. Her fingers, stiff with terror, found it at last. Above her, the front door of the cottage opened with a small, neat click. The latch gave. She pushed herself into the opening on her belly, which was not easy now, and began to crawl. Above her, she heard the soft footfalls of the hooded men entering the cottage. She was already out in the orchard grass, pressed low against the roots of the oldest apple tree. She saw the larger thing then. It stood at the edge of the orchard, between the trees, very still. It was the shape of a wolf but the size of a plow horse. Its fur was the color of something burned. Its eyes did not glow the amber of the northern packs or the gold of a shifted warrior. Its eyes were the white of blind things. The great nostrils were working, and Seraphel understood with a cold crawl of horror that the thing was not hunting by scent. The thing was hunting by the sound of a heartbeat. Her heart was a drum. The burned wolf turned its blind white head slowly, and its nostrils flared, and Seraphel understood she had perhaps 10 breaths left before it came for her through the roots. She did the only thing she had left to do. She began, very softly, to sing. Not a full song, only a thread of melody, the lowest hum she could make, the shepherding tune her mother had once sung to her. The sound that came out of her now was hoarse and cracked and very quiet. The burned wolf's head snapped toward her. So did something else. Far away, much further away, something vast answered. It was not a sound she heard with her ears. It was a sound she felt along the crescent at her collarbone, which lit up suddenly with a heat so sharp she nearly lost her grip on the melody. The mark pulsed once, pulsed again. A rhythm, a call, a recognition. She understood in that instant that her voice had not only drawn the burned wolf, her voice had drawn him. He was coming. From somewhere in the hills above the village, moving faster than anything that wore a human shape could move. The mark at her collarbone was beating in time with his running. But the burned wolf was closer. She saw the white eyes first, low to the ground, moving toward her through the tangled roots. She heard the soft click of its jaw, once, like a dog tasting the air. She had nowhere to run. She let go of the melody. She drew in the deepest breath her small crushed lungs would allow. And she did what she had sworn on her first night in Calder Hollow that she would never do again. She sang, not softly. She opened her mouth in the wet grass beneath the oldest apple tree, and she gave her full voice to the dark orchard. And the sound that rose out of her was a sound she had forgotten she could make. The world around her went white, not with light, with stillness. The branches stopped moving. The burned wolf froze with one paw lifted, its white eyes fixed on nothing, its jaw half open. The melody poured out of her, and the air of the orchard went thick and heavy, and Seraphel understood for the first time in her life that her voice was not only a voice, her voice was a working, a thing that could reach into the world and bend the world toward her. She had sung 1,000 times at the summer lodge, and she had not known. The burned wolf made a terrible low sound and tried to move. It could not. Its legs shook. Its blind eyes filled slowly with something that might have been water. Seraphel did not stop singing. She only knew that the melody had opened something inside her that she had not known was locked, and that so long as she held the note, the burned wolf could not reach her. Behind her, in the cottage, the hooded men came back out the front door. They were shouting now. They had found the cellar. They had found the open hatch. They were running in 3 directions, and one of them, the tallest, had turned at the sound of her voice, and was coming straight toward the oldest apple tree. And above the village, tearing down out of the hills, something enormous crashed through the edge of the orchard. It came through the trees the way a storm comes through a sail. Branches snapped. The hooded man who had been running toward her turned, too slowly, and had time only to raise one arm before the thing from the hills struck him and took him off his feet, and into the darkness between the trunks. She only heard, a moment later, a single wet sound that ended very quickly. Then the thing from the hills came into the clearing where she lay. It was a wolf, larger than the burned wolf. Its fur was the color of old winter pine, so dark it was almost black. Its shoulders were as high as her shoulder would have been if she had been standing. Its eyes were not amber. Its eyes were not gold. Its eyes were the deep, sorrowful gray of a man she had loved at the summer lodge. The great wolf stopped when it saw her. Its whole body went still, its ears folded back, its massive head lowered, and a sound came out of it that was not a growl, was not a howl, and was a long, broken, heartbroken noise that seemed to come up from somewhere deeper inside the animal than an animal should have. She stopped singing. The burned wolf, released, turned and fled into the dark orchard. The great gray-eyed wolf took one step toward her, then another. It walked with the slow, trembling care of a creature afraid that the thing in front of it might not be real. It stopped 2 paces from her. It lowered its great head. It pressed its muzzle, very gently, against the curve of her belly where the 2 small ones had been hiding. The small ones moved, both of them at once, in 2 different places. The great wolf made the broken sound again. Seraphel could not speak. She could not breathe. She lifted one hand, slow and uncertain, and laid it on the top of the wolf's dark head. The wolf shuddered and shifted. The change was not the tearing, violent thing the old stories spoke of. It was a slow unfolding, the way a cloth unfolds in water. One moment she was touching the head of a wolf. The next she was touching the hair of a man who had gone to his knees in the wet grass in front of her. One hand pressed flat against the swell of her belly. The other held still beside her face, as if he did not yet dare to touch her. He was thinner than she remembered. His hair was longer. There was gray in it now, at the temples. His face was drawn tight over the bones of his jaw, and his eyes, which had once laughed at her in the dark of the summer lodge, were hollowed out with something close to madness. "Say it again," he whispered. His voice cracked on the words. "Say what?" she breathed. "Anything." His hand on her belly shook. "I do not know your face. They took your face. But I know the sound of you. Please, say my name. Let me hear it." Seraphel understood finally what had been done. Not his memory of her. Not entirely. Something crueler. They had left him the feeling of her, the ache of her, and the shape of her in his chest. They had only taken her face. For 3 months, Kelric Alpha King of Merovane had been walking the villages of the Northern Reach, listening at windows, because he did not know what the woman he loved looked like anymore. But he would know her voice if he ever heard it again. Seraphel opened her mouth. She said his name. And the Alpha King of the Northern Reach, on his knees in the wet grass of an orchard in a village he had never heard of, lowered his forehead against the curve of her belly and wept as if his heart had been waiting all this time for permission to break. She did not know how long they stayed like that. His forehead was still pressed against her belly. He had not yet looked up at her face. "Kelric," she said again, because he had asked for his name and she could say it now. He shuddered against her. "I had begun to think you were dead. Varric kept telling me you were dead. every messenger, every letter. And I could feel you alive on the other side of him, and I could not prove it. And no one at court would believe me, because no one at court knew you existed. You knew. I knew. And I did not trust it. Forgive me. Every time I closed my eyes, the mark on my throat burned, and I knew you were out there, and I knew I was failing you. Stand up, she said gently. Look at me. I cannot see you. I know. Stand up. Look at me anyway. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes found her face and passed over it without settling. They moved across her brow, her cheekbones, her mouth, and she watched them struggle to fix on any one of her features. It was not that he saw a blur. It was that his mind would not hold what his eyes were showing him. I can feel you, he said. I cannot see you. You are standing in front of me, and I cannot hold your face in my mind for the count of 3. What did he do? He used a working, an old one, older than the wolf lines. He called it the veiling. He put it into my wine on the night of the banquet. Brenner, my first sworn, found the residue in the cup afterward. The veiling does not take a person from you. It takes the shape of a person from you. Anyone who tries to describe you to me becomes hazy in my memory also. I know you are small. I know you have dark hair. I know you were a singer in my kitchens. I know your name because your name is not your face. He pressed his lips together. I know I love you. That is the only part of you he could not reach. The small ones kicked against her lap. She took his face in both her hands and turned it up toward hers. Then listen, she said quietly. You do not need to see me tonight. You will see me again. The veiling can be broken. Every binding can be broken. Tonight you only need to feel me. Can you feel me? His eyes closed. Yes, he whispered. Then that is enough for now. He leaned his cheek into her hand. His breath went out of him in a long, slow line, as if some knot tied in his chest had at last been loosened by half a turn. There are 2 of them, he said. Yes. You did not know. I did not know when you sent me to the banquet. I learned before I was asked to sing. Varric chose the hymn. The hymn was a binding too. I did not sing it. I walked out of the hall before I could. And the mark. It bled that night. It has bled again tonight. It never healed. Mine did not either. He pulled aside the high collar of his own tunic. She saw the shape of a mark there, set just above his collarbone in the place where she had pressed her mouth the first night at the summer lodge. A crescent, smaller than hers. And around the crescent, a second curve, dark as old ink, running through it like a second moon. She knew that second curve. It was the same second curve that had appeared on her own mark during her exile. What is it? She whispered. I do not know. I have asked every elder, every bone reader. No one has seen this shape before. One of the river priestesses told me it looked like a mark of 2 bodies becoming 3. She would not say more. She was frightened. Seraphel looked down at her belly. 3, she said quietly. 3. He was very still. Seraphel? What did the priestess mean? I think our children are already weaving. I think they have been weaving since I was carrying them. I think the reason the veiling cannot quite take me from you is that they are threading me back into your memory every night while I sleep. I think that is why you have been dreaming of a woman you cannot see, walking toward you across a field of ash. I think they are calling you. Kelric put his hand against her belly again. Then they are already stronger than I am, he said at last. There was wonder in his voice, and under the wonder something closer to grief. They have been doing what I could not. We are finding each other. Yes. His hand flattened against her. Yes. We are. Something cracked far off in the orchard. They both went still. Kelric rose to his feet and drew Seraphel up with him, setting her behind him. Brenner, he said, low and sharp. A man stepped out of the shadow of the apple trees. He was as tall as Kelric, lean, a long knife loose in one hand. He wore the dark leathers of the king's personal guard. "2 of them left, sire," Brenner said. "The third we took down by the hatch. One has already crossed the stream. The other is circling the orchard." "Circling toward what?" "The cottage. I believe they mean to fire it. Then we do not give them the time." Seraphel. "Is there anyone in that cottage you cannot lose?" Brenna. Her voice caught. "The elder. She took me in. She was going to the trader to arrange passage. She may be on her way back." Brenner. "Go." The man was gone before Kelric had finished speaking. Kelric turned back to her. She saw him remember that he was a king, his shoulders set. "Can you walk?" "I can walk. I have 10 wolves waiting at the crossing. They will take you and the elder up the old deer trail into the Marrowback Hills. There is a holdfast there, built by my grandmother, never been found." Kelric. She caught his sleeve. "Varric is not in the north anymore. He has come south. He sent the burned wolf. He sent the hooded men. He will not stop. You cannot kill him by leaving me in a holdfast while you ride back to Merovene. He will follow you. Or he will follow me. You are saying we end it now. I am saying we end it together." He looked at her for a long moment with that hollow, searching gaze that kept sliding off her face. Then, slowly, he took her hand and lifted it to his lips. "My queen," he said quietly. The word went through her like a struck bell. "I am not your queen yet. You were my queen the night I marked you. You were my queen every day I was searching for you. When this is finished, I will tear the veiling off your face in front of every great house of the northern reach, and I will name you in the old tongue, on the old stones, in the old way. I understand you. Good." Far off through the trees, a howl rose, long, low, unmistakably Brenner's, and all clear. A second howl answered from further west, then a third from the north. Seraphel understood then that Kelric had not come down out of the hills alone. "They are mine," Kelric said. "They are the ones who believed me when the court did not. There are more, many more. They will come when I call them, because Varric has made one very great mistake." "What mistake?" Kelric's smile was not a pleasant thing. "He allowed me to find my voice. He meant her." Seraphel touched the crescent at her collarbone, which had stopped bleeding at last. She felt the low, warm pulse of it beating in time with the mark on his throat, and beneath that, the small, restless movement of the 2 weavers inside her. She felt, under all of it, something rise inside her chest. Not grief, not fear. Song. "Then let us go and find him," she said. And Kelric, who could not yet see her face, turned his head toward the sound of her voice and began to smile. They did not ride openly. Brenner had talked Kelric out of it. "She is carrying," the Forsworn had said, "and she is bleeding from a binding we do not yet understand. We ride covered, or we do not ride at all." So they rode in Audrin's wagon, the false floor concealing them. Brenna rode up on the seat beside the trader, wrapped in a gray shawl, a small knife in her skirt. The 10 wolves of the king's personal line ran alongside the wagon in the trees. Brenner ranged a mile ahead. A slim, gray-haired woman named Isolde, whom Kelric introduced as his second sworn, ranged a mile behind. Seraphel had thought she would not be able to sleep. She was asleep within 20 minutes. She dreamed of the field of white ash, and she dreamed of him walking across it toward her. And she dreamed that this time, when he opened his mouth, sound came out. He was coming, and somewhere at the edge of the ash field 2 small silhouettes walked hand in hand beside him. She woke 3 hours before dawn. Kelric was awake beside her. "How long until the crossing?" she murmured. "Another hour." Brenner sent a signal back. "The road is clean." Seraphel, tell me something about these months. Anything. The smallest thing. I cannot picture your face in any of it. His profile was a shadow. He was looking at the planks, not at her. She began to speak. She told him about the weaver's cottage, the dusty loom and the cedar chest. She told him about Brenna and the elder's grandchildren. She told him about the first day she had felt the small ones move when she had been kneading bread and one of them had kicked her so hard she had laughed out loud for the first time since she had fled. When she told him about the humming in the dark, the way she had sung only when no one could hear, she felt him go very still. I am sorry, he said. Do not be sorry. I left you to a silence that was not yours. Varric left me that silence, not you. And the silence is over. His hand slid up from her belly and found her cheek. He did not try to look at her. He only touched. His thumb moved along the bone beneath her eye, across the line of her mouth, down to her jaw, learning her. Slowly. I will hear you sing again, he said in daylight, where anyone can hear. You will live to finish all of it. They did not speak again until the wagon reached the crossing. The wolves of the king's personal line came out of the trees when Audrin pulled the horses to a stop. 10 of them, all sizes, all colors, each wearing the small iron band of the king's household. Brenner appeared on horseback from the tree line. His face was grim. Sire, we have a problem at Myrovan. Tell me. Varric is not in Myrovan. He has left the city. He took with him 2 of the river houses who have turned on you in your absence, and a thing we have no name for, and the daughter of House Ilveran. They have ridden south, sire. Where are they going? Calder Hollow. Seraphel closed her eyes. They are bringing the banquet to us, she said. Sire, there is worse. The daughter of House Ilveran is riding with them willingly. She is dressed in red and she wears a white veil. She believes she is riding to a wedding. A quiet wedding. A private oath. She thinks you sent for her. I am not going to marry her. Varric does not appear to have told her that. Kelric's hand tightened on Seraphel's. He is going to try to lay the alliance again, he said slowly, with the same binding he used on the night of the banquet. He thinks that if he can force me into the oath again, with her, the veiling will hold forever and Seraphel will simply cease to exist from my memory. Yes, sire. He does not know we are together. He believes you are still in the northern hills. Good. Let him continue to believe it. He lay back down beside Seraphel. Brenner. Ride to Calder Hollow, clear the village. Every man, every woman, every child. Put them in the holdfast, seal the road. Sire, Isolde. Send runners to the 3 mountain packs that still keep the old oaths. Tell them the Alpha King asks them to come south, before the second dawn if they cannot manage the first. Tell them the veiling works again in Merovane. Tell them their king has found his voice. Sire, and Audrin, turn the wagon around. There was a small silence. Sire, with respect, the queen is carrying. The holdfast is a fortress. Calder Hollow is a meadow with a few fences. I am aware, Audrin. Turn the wagon around. Aye, Majesty. The wagon shifted. The horses came about. The wolves of the king's personal line turned as one, without a sound. Seraphel lay in the dark beside Kelric and stared up at the planks. You are not going to the holdfast. No. You are going back to Calder Hollow to meet him there. Yes. Because he does not know I am with you. Because he still believes this is a wedding? Yes. Kelric. You mean to walk into his binding. I mean to let him begin his binding. It is not the same thing. Kelric. Seraphel. His hand found hers under the planks and closed around it very hard. Listen to me. The veiling has a weakness. I have been studying it. It binds one face to another in the mind of the one who is worked upon. It cannot be broken by argument. It cannot be broken by time. It can only be broken by one thing. by the one whose face has been taken, standing in front of the one who has been worked upon, and using her voice to say his true name, in the middle of the very binding that is trying to relay itself. It is the one moment when the binding is open. She understood. "You are going to let Varric begin the second binding," she said, "so that I can stand up in the middle of it and sing. Yes. And if I fail." "You will not fail." "If I fail, Kelric." "If you fail," he said slowly, "then I marry the daughter of House Ilveran at sunrise, and I forget your face forever. And the small ones are born into a world where I do not know their mother's name. So you will not fail, Seraphel." She closed her eyes. "All right," she whispered. "My queen. Better." The wagon rolled on through the last dark hour of the night. Somewhere ahead of them in the dawn, a man who was not a man was riding south toward a meadow with a woman in a white veil at his side, believing that he was about to finish the binding he had begun in a banquet hall built to silence ordinary voices. And Seraphel, who had been taught to silence hers, lay in the dark beside the Alpha King of the Northern Reach and practiced her lowest note and did not sleep again. Dawn came to Calder Hollow the color of hammered tin. Seraphel had been moved from the false floor of the wagon to the low hayloft above the village smithy, where Brenner had set her with a heavy blanket and a clear view down through a knot in the boards to the small green meadow at the heart of the village. Between the smithy and the meeting house, the grass had been cut short by goats for 100 years, and the old standing stone in the middle, moss-eaten and split at the top, had stood there for longer than anyone could remember. The village had been emptied in 2 hours. Brenner had done it with the cold efficiency of a man who had emptied villages before. No one had argued. Brenna had refused to go. "I have no need of a holdfast," the old elder had told Brenner. "I will watch over the girl who sat at my kitchen table while your king was losing his mind in the hills." Brenner had not argued. So now Brenna sat in the hayloft beside Seraphel, braiding Seraphel's hair with the slow, competent fingers of a woman who had braided many brides in her long life. "You are sure you can do this?" Brenna said quietly. "I am sure I have to." "That is not the same thing, child." Below them, Kelric was speaking in low tones with Isolde. "He loves you very much," Brenna said. "Yes." "You are afraid?" "Yes." "Good. A woman who is not afraid at a moment like this is a woman who has not understood the moment." Brenna. If I fall, if the binding takes me, then the small ones come out of me. Not before. You put your hand on my belly and you say the old cutting words. You take them out. You wrap them. You give them to Kelric, and he raises them without me. Brenna's fingers went still in her hair. "Child, say you will do it. I will not let it come to that. Say you will do it anyway." Brenna was quiet for a long moment. "I will do it," she said at last. "You are a terrible, terrible young woman, and I will do it." Seraphel laughed once, small and wet. "Thank you." Across the grass, by the meeting house, Kelric was being dressed. Brenner and a young wolf named Marin were working over him with the careful movements of people who understood exactly what this morning was. A long dark tunic in the colors of the Northern Reach, a wolf pelt cloak, a slim silver circlet. They were not making him beautiful. They were making him legible. So they were going to give him a king who looked weakened. Kelric's shoulders had been made to slump. His hair had been left loose. His face had been rubbed with a paste of wood ash that gave the illusion of hollower cheeks. He was a very good actor. She heard the first sound of the horses almost an hour before they appeared. Varric did not arrive quietly. He rode at the head of 24 mounted warriors in the colors of the 2 southern river houses that had turned their cloaks, and the banners they carried were not Marovane's banners. They were old banners Seraphel had seen only once, in a tapestry in the deep undercroft of the castle that had been turned to the wall 2 generations ago. He was bringing a crown with him that was not Kelric's crown. Behind him rode the daughter of House Ilveran. red riding cloak, white veil over the deep auburn hair, a small smile that Seraphel recognized as the smile of a woman who had been told, repeatedly, that today was the day she would stop being a daughter and start being a queen. Seraphel felt a small, sharp pity for her. Varric dismounted. In the cold dawn light, his pale hair looked almost silver, and his face looked smoother than the face of a man of his age ought to look. There was a stillness to him that no living man carried. He walked out to the center of the meadow alone. Kelric was already there. "Your Majesty," Varric said, and his voice carried across the meadow in a way that made the grass seem to lean slightly toward him. "I am grateful you came south. I came south because you told me she was here. She is here. In a manner." "In what manner?" "In the manner of a memory that has at last begun to fade. You have been hunting a ghost, Your Majesty. I have come to offer you a living woman instead. The Lady Sorwin of House Ilveran. She has worn white. She has prepared the old words. It is time for this ache of yours to end." Kelric looked, very slowly, at the Lady Sorwin. "The stone is ready. A small ceremony. A quiet one. And afterward you will ride north with your new queen, and the old ghost will lift from you, and the veiling will settle into a true binding at last, and you will sleep." Seraphel saw the tiny flicker in Kelric's eyes at the word sleep. She saw how Varric watched for it. She saw how Kelric had let him find it. "Read the words," Kelric said quietly. He reached into his cloak and drew out a small folded cloth, and from the cloth he drew a single sprig of dried herb. The crescent at her collarbone flared. The small ones went rigid. This was the hymn. This was the binding. This was the thing Varric had laid into her voice on the night of the banquet. He did not need her to sing it. He had learned to carry it in his own mouth. He began to speak in the old tongue. The Lady Sorwin stepped up beside Kelric. Varric took one of her hands and one of Kelric's hands, and he laid the dried sprig across their joined wrists, and he began to weave. Seraphel could feel it, a slow pressure building in the air, like the weight before a storm, pushing down on Kelric's memory. She had perhaps 40 heartbeats before the binding settled. She rose from the hayloft floor. She climbed down the ladder. Brenna met her at the bottom. She only reached up and pressed her palm briefly to Seraphel's cheek. "Go," Brenna said. Seraphel walked out of the smithy into the meadow. She did not run. She walked, steady and slow, the way she had walked down the length of the banquet hall. Only now her eyes were not lowered. She walked with her head up, with the braid down her back and the high collar open at her throat, so that the mark on her collarbone could be seen by anyone who cared to look. The Lady Sorwin saw her first. The lady's mouth opened. She made a small sound that was not a word. Varric's voice faltered. He turned his head. His bog-water eyes found her, and for the first time since Seraphel had known of his existence, Lord Varric looked surprised. "You," he said softly. Kelric did not turn his head. If he turned his head, Varric would see the king who had come down out of the hills, and the binding would collapse before Seraphel could sing. "You should not have come," Varric said to Seraphel. His voice had gone quieter, almost kind. "I gave you a season of stillness. I gave you a loom. I gave you every chance to live. Why have you come?" "Because you sent a burned wolf into the orchard," Seraphel said, and her voice carried across the meadow without effort. "And because you do not get to finish what you began." Varric's eyes narrowed. He lifted his free hand. Seraphel opened her mouth, and the meadow exploded with sound. Not her song. Not yet. From the southern road. A great crash of hooves and a scream of horses and a volley of arrows loosed all at once from somewhere in the tree line, cutting down 3 of the mounted warriors before any of them had time to draw. Varric's head snapped around. The Lady Sorwin screamed. Kelric's slumped shoulders straightened in one clean movement, the dull in his eyes gone, and he caught the wrist Varric had lifted and twisted it, and the dried sprig of the binding fell into the grass between them. "Now, Seraphel," Kelric said. Seraphel took the deepest breath her crushed lungs would allow, and she sang. The world went white again, the way it had in the orchard, only this time it was not only her voice. The two small weavers inside her had been waiting for this moment. They joined her, not in sound, in pressure, in something that poured down through her body and out through her mouth, and the old standing stone lit up from within as if a lantern had been kindled at its heart, and the dried sprig in the grass went to black ash in a single heartbeat, and every bird within half a mile rose at once into the gray morning air, silent and strange. Varric staggered. The Lady Sorwin fell to her knees. Kelric turned his head. His gray eyes came to rest on Seraphel without sliding off her face. He saw her. He saw her. She watched him see her, and she watched his whole body understand what his eyes were telling him. And she watched the last of the veiling tear apart and fall away from him in invisible strips. And she watched the Alpha King of the Northern Reach begin at last to smile the smile she had been waiting so long to see again. And then, before he could cross the meadow to her, Lord Varric, who had not, after all, come unprepared, lifted his other hand, and the thing behind him in the line of warriors, the thing that was not a man and was not a wolf, came out of the trees. And the meadow filled with the low, wrong hum of a binding that had been waiting all this time to be finished, and was not going to leave the valley without trying, one last time, to take her. Seraphel kept singing. The thing from the trees came across the grass toward her, and Kelric ran, and the small weavers inside her began to turn. The thing from the trees was not a wolf. It walked on 4 legs, with the general shape of a great hound, but its shoulders were too high and too narrow, and the fur along its back was something closer to the dry gray of a shed snakeskin. Its eyes were no color. They were the way a pane of glass is no color. She understood then what Varric had been. Not a lord. Not a man wearing a lord's face. Varric had been the pane of glass. And the thing that walked now out of the tree line was what had been looking through him for 200 years. She did not stop singing. The song had taken on a shape of its own the moment the 2 small weavers inside her had joined it. It was a current running through her. If she closed her mouth, it would go back into her body and burn her from the inside. So she sang, and she walked forward. It moved faster than it should have. Kelric shouted something she could not hear over her own voice, and angled his run, cutting across the meadow at a sharp line, and he hit the thing from the tree's broadside at full speed. He did not shift. He did not have time. He struck it as a man with a blade, and the long, curved knife bit into the loose gray hide, and the thing made a sound that was not a sound. It was a pressure. The same wrong hum that had filled the meadow, only coming now from a living throat. It threw Kelric off as easily as a dog throws off a fly. He hit the grass rolling and was on his feet again before he had finished. Brenner and Isolde broke from the tree line, and Seraphel watched them drop into their wolf forms in a single unbroken stride, Brenner a lean silver gray, and Isolde a darker brindled shape beside him. A younger wolf joined them, and the 4 of them moved around the creature the way Seraphel had once seen a wolf pack circle a bear. Not to kill it, only to slow it. Seraphel kept walking forward. Behind the pale gray thing, Varric had not moved. He stood where he had stood at the beginning of the binding, the dried sprig of black ash at his feet, his bog-water eyes fixed on Seraphel. His face had become very still and very smooth and very old. She saw in his face, for the first time, what he really was. He was tired. He had been wearing a lord for 200 years, and the thing that had been looking through him was no longer bothering to pretend. The bog water in his eyes had begun to retreat. A second color was coming up behind it, a color that was not a color. The same pane of glass that lived in the creature fighting Kelric. He was going to step out of Varric now. Seraphel understood, in the slow, clear way the song made everything understandable, that this was why Varric had done all of it. It had never been about the crown of Merovane. Varric had been looking for a voice. He had found her 2 winters ago in the cold cellar of the castle when she had hummed over a basket of winter apples, and the air had gone still around her. He did not want her dead. He wanted her mouth. The Lady Sorwin was still on her knees in the grass. Her white veil had slid back. Her face was wet with tears she did not seem to know were falling. She was staring at Varric with the expression of a woman who was understanding, in a single terrible instant, every lie she had ever been told. "Lady Sorwin," Seraphel said, and it was strange how easily the words slipped out of her while the song kept running. "Get up. Run north along the tree line. There is an elder named Brenna in the smithy. Go to her." The Lady Sorwin stared at her for a long moment. Then she got up. She lifted her skirts. She ran. Varric did not try to stop her. He took one slow step forward, and the pane of glass behind his eyes came a little more forward with him, and his mouth opened to begin speaking the old tongue again. Seraphel reached the standing stone. She put her hand on it. The stone was warm. It had been warm since her voice had lit the lantern at its heart, and it was warmer now, as if something in the old rock had been waiting a very long time for a singer to touch it. She felt the warmth run up her arm, and she understood then, without anyone telling her, that the stone had been set in this meadow for exactly this. The stone had been set here by people who had known about voices like hers. She opened her mouth wider. The song came out of her in a shape she had not made it make before. It was no longer a melody, it was a line, a single high clear line running out of her mouth across the grass, and where the line touched the pale gray thing, the thing stopped. Its loose hide shuddered. The pressure of its wrong hum faltered. The no-color eyes turned toward her, and the thing that lived behind them recognized what was happening, and the thing that lived behind them was afraid. Varric began to speak faster, trying to lay a new binding over her song before it could finish. He did not have the time. The line of Seraphel's voice struck the old standing stone and ran down into the earth, and the earth went silent in the way a bell goes silent the moment before it is struck. And Seraphel felt the 2 small weavers inside her turn one last time, and then she drew the breath she had been saving. She sang his true name. Not Varric, not the name he had been wearing. The other one. The name that the pane of glass behind his eyes had not spoken in 200 years. The name she could not have known. The name that came up out of the old standing stone through the soles of her feet and out of her mouth, without her choosing it, because the stone had kept the name the way a locked box keeps a letter. The name came out of her in one long, cold syllable. Varric screamed. It was the first human sound she had ever heard him make. The pane of glass behind his eyes shattered. The no-color light poured out of him in a thin, pale stream and was caught by the line of Seraphel's song and pulled, slowly and without mercy, into the old standing stone. The stone drank it the way dry ground drinks the first rain of autumn. The pale gray thing in the meadow shuddered. Its hide went slack. Its long, wrong neck folded. It dropped into the grass in a boneless heap, empty. Varric stood for one heartbeat longer, then the thing that had been wearing him stepped out of him entirely, through his mouth, in one last thin breath of no color, and was pulled into the stone. And Lord Varric, who had not been a lord at all, crumpled to his knees in the grass as a very old, very tired man, and did not get up. The song went out of Seraphel slowly. The line thinned. The warmth in the standing stone faded back into ordinary moss-eaten rock. The meadow began to breathe again. Seraphel lifted her hand off the stone. Her knees went out from under her. She did not hit the ground. Kelric caught her. "Look at me," he said. She looked at him. He saw her. His gray eyes held her face and did not slide off. He saw the small scar along her jaw that she had gotten at 6 when her mother's cottage had burned. He saw the dark hair that had come loose from Brenna's braid. He saw her. "There you are," Kelrick whispered. Seraphel began to cry. She had not cried properly since she had fled. She had cried in pieces, a little at a time, in the dark, when no one could hear. She cried now all at once, into the wolf pelt cloak at his shoulder, and he held her, and he rocked her. The wolves gathered around them. The mountain packs had arrived while the song had been at its height. They stood in a great ring around the standing stone, 50 of them, maybe more. Their heads were lowered. They were listening to the quiet. After a long while, Brenner returned to human form and, pulling a cloak around his shoulders, cleared his throat. "Sire, Lord Varric, is he dead?" "No, sire. But he is not, I think, any longer the lord we have known. No, he has not been the lord we have known for 200 years. We will keep him alive. He will answer in time for every letter he sent me about her death. Take him to the smithy. Put him in iron." Isolde came forward next, also in human form now. She knelt in the grass beside them, and she laid her forehead, very briefly, against the curve of Seraphel's belly, in the old gesture of a sworn warrior acknowledging the heir of her king. Then she rose and went to see to the others. Kelrick looked down at Seraphel. "Can you stand?" "I think so." "Not yet. A little longer." He held her a little longer. The gray morning turned slowly into a yellow morning. Somewhere at the far end of the meadow, Brenna was walking slowly across the grass with Lady Sorwin holding her arm. When she reached them, the lady did not try to speak. She only knelt in the grass a small distance away and cried quietly into her own sleeves. Seraphel reached one hand out to her. The Lady Sorwin took it. They did not speak. 2 weeks later, in the great hall of Merovane, which had been scrubbed clean of any trace of the night of the banquet, the Alpha King of the Northern Reach stood before every great house of the realm and said the old words over a small, dark-haired woman with a high braid and a swelling belly and a crescent moon at her collarbone that no fabric covered. He said them in the old tongue, on the old stones of the dais, with the doors thrown wide so that the common folk of Merovane could hear every word. He named her Seraphel, once of the kitchens, once of Calder Hollow, once of a weaver's cottage at the edge of an orchard. He named her his found voice. He named her his true queen. He named her the mother of the 2 weavers that had threaded her back into his mind while he had been walking villages in the dark. He did not ask the great houses to approve. None of them tried to. A month after the naming, the Lady Sorwin of House Ilveran was quietly given a letter of release by her own father. She rode north to a small coastal village that kept bees and took a new name and was last heard of teaching the children of the village how to read. Seraphel sent her a length of gray wool once a season for the rest of her life. Varric did not live out the year. He died in a small iron cell beneath the castle, of nothing more than age. The thing that had worn him for 200 years had been drinking his life the whole time, and with the thing gone, the body had caught up with itself. The old standing stone in the meadow of Calder Hollow was left exactly where it stood. The villagers, who had returned from the holdfast, began to bring small offerings to it. A sprig of apple blossom in spring, a handful of new grain at harvest, a small knot of gray wool in winter. They only said that the stone had helped the young healer on the morning she had sung down something very bad. On a soft morning in late summer, in the private chamber above the old royal gardens of Merovane, Seraphel was delivered of her children. The birth was long. Brenna had come north at Kelrick's request. A boy came first. He was small and dark-haired and very quiet. A girl followed her brother by almost an hour. She was smaller still, and her hair, when it dried, was not the dark of her mother's, but the pale ash gray of something that had been weaving in a deep place for a long time. She did not cry when she was born. She only opened her eyes and looked at Brenna with the level, steady gaze of a creature that had been awake inside her mother for many months, and then she turned her head and looked at Kaelric, who had come through the door the moment Brenna had called for him, and she made a small considering sound that was not quite a sound. Kaelric took her from Brenna's hands. He held her against his chest. He held the boy against his other arm. He knelt beside the bed, where Seraphel lay tired and laughing and crying all at once. "They are very small," he said at last. "They will grow. I did not know what I thought." He kissed her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For all of it. For the cottage. For the orchard. For the stone. For keeping them alive in you when I could not remember your face. For letting me kneel in wet grass and weep on your belly like a man who had lost his mind. You had lost your mind. A little. A little is forgivable." He laughed. It was a real laugh. The first one she had heard out of him in a long time. Outside the window, a woman of the kitchens was singing. She was singing an ordinary song, a work song, the kind of song a woman sings while she sets out linens to dry. It was only a voice, rising out of a garden on a soft summer morning, doing the ordinary thing that voices do. Seraphel listened to her, and she smiled, and she closed her eyes. She thought of the banquet hall of Merovane, which had been built so high and so wide that ordinary voices could not carry in it. She thought of a girl in a pale blue dress kneeling at the foot of a dais with a secret she had not yet been allowed to speak. She thought of an orchard, a song, a meadow, a stone. A man who had spent a whole long winter listening at the windows of strangers for the sound of a voice he could no longer recognize by sight. The girl opened her strange gray eyes and looked at Seraphel. And Seraphel understood, with the last clear thought she had before sleep took her, that the girl was going to sing one day. Not as Seraphel had sung in the meadow. Differently. Something else. A new kind of voice, brought into the world by two parents who had, against every binding laid against them, found their way back to the same room. The kitchen woman outside went on singing her ordinary song. Seraphel slept. And somewhere deep beneath the castle of Merovane, in a stone passage that had been sealed 2 generations ago with its tapestry turned to the wall, a door that no one remembered, in a room that had not been opened in 200 years, settled a little deeper into its hinges and stayed shut. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.